So the endless stream of anti-Jordan Peterson articles keep coming at us on a weekly basis. And here is one on the Washington Post that is so poorly thought out. I'm going to read the beginning and the end. The middle is a bunch of history of the men's rights movement, and then go right to the comments and you'll see why. The comments attached to this article. Jordan Peterson and the Return of the Men's Right Movement. Why They've Come Back into Fashion by Allison Lefkowitz. It's from a few days ago. There's Jordan Peterson. It's time to bring back the patriarchy. That, anyway, is the argument of a new generation of men's rights activists who have diagnosed the primary problem of our time as the oppression of men, an oppression, they argue, that has had deadly consequences. Jordan Peterson, a University of Toronto psychology professor and patriarchy advocate, oh boy, recently expressed his concern for men like Alec Manassian, a self-identified incel who, after blaming women for his inability to find a sexual partner, killed 10 people by driving his car through a crowd. Peterson bemoans that no one cares about the men who fail to address his alleged injustice. He endorses bringing back patriarchy, urging women to embrace lives as housewives and to submit to a regime of enforced monogamy. Peterson sees such drastic interventions as necessary because he believes today's forgotten citizens, the victims of gender oppression, are men. Yet for all the attention in recent months to pro-patriarchy personalities such as Peterson and the violent misogyny of incels, neither they nor their ideas are entirely new. In fact, almost as soon as second-wave feminists in the 1960s and 70s observed again that women were treated unequally, men's rights activists proclaimed that, well, actually men were the real victims of gender discrimination. And here's the part where they go through this history of men's rights groups, ones they've considered men's rights groups, and then they get to the part about the internet and a voice for men, which bring you to the part where, on the other hand, we cannot assume that the internet solves all the organizing problems of men's rights activists because sympathy with incels is unlikely to have mainstream appeal. It's possible that these ideas will be contained to the fringes, but that doesn't mean we can rest easy. Just as in the 60s and 70s, patriarchy has powerful defenders, even among those who don't identify as men's rights activists. Violent misogyny is commonplace even among those who don't identify as incels. Therefore, proponents of gender equality must work to ensure that our side poses a well-organized and powerful opponent not only to the newest men's rights groups, but to the persistent patriarchal forces in our society. Only then can we ensure that the difficulty of organizing extends to this generation of violent husbands, incels, and other men's rights activists. So, the part I skipped over, and I'll have links in the description if you want to read the history of M.R.As and men's rights groups from the 60s, 70s, up until the current time. Not worth really taking my time to read, but the absurdity of this article will be, I started writing my observations, my comments on this, but I want to read the comments in the comments section, and because they mirror just about everything I want to say, but they're more entertaining than the actual article, more informative. And Justin Henry writes in the comments, in a strange inversion, the comments are better reasoned, centered, and much more engaging than the article. I am wondering how an article of this poor quality makes it into arguably the most important news outlet today. Certainly, the editor who approved publication recognized this as a poorly researched and likely dishonest essay. The Washington Post generally does better than this. So you get an idea. I started writing critiques and analysis of the horror story of the article, and then when I got to the comments, I'm like, I'm wasting my time because these are a lot better than anything I would have said. They're more to the point, and there's a whole bunch of different viewpoints, not just mine. Another lover says Peterson sees such drastic interventions as necessary because this woman is so unhinged. How did this piece make it past her editor? Calling the social norm of monogamy a drastic intervention is like calling civilization a drastic intervention. It's likely that because every civilized society in the history of the world practices monogamy. The ones that have tried other things like communal child raising and the like don't exist anymore, honey. They don't exist because they crumble. All of them. Get your head out of the sunshine, sweetheart. Look, it's just the stupidest thing in the world to call Jordan Peterson a patriarchy advocate. So I'm glad his critics continued to prove themselves the unhinged and irrational. I'm laughing from the first sentence into this article, and I have this feeling, can you feel it with me? I have this feeling that all across the country in waves as this article pops onto computer screens, people everywhere are laughing too. Thank you for bringing the mirth to this land. The author of this article did not properly research Jordan Peterson or his positions, which is usually the case with these Peterson hit pieces. If she had done so, perhaps her premise might have fallen apart. Peterson articulates a position that life is full of suffering, and the best thing you can do in response to this reality is to get your act together. Take a look at yourself and where you are, and compare that to where you wish to be. Then also take a look at where you might end up if you don't take on the responsibility of trying to better yourself. His thesis is that the proper place for an individual is to voluntarily face the chaos in their lives and make some order out of it. The process of doing this is what brings meaning to one's life, and it improves one's life. And if done well, it can improve one's family situation. And if done very well, one can bring good to the community. His whole deal is about facing the challenge and suffering of one's life, taking on the burden and responsibility for it, and saying, what can I do to improve my lot? For the record, I am a middle-aged woman. I have great joys in my life, as well as challenge, disappointment, and even some trauma. The maps of meaning have really helped me understand what was going on for me when I was diagnosed with PTSD following traumatic events. Peterson's articulation of what the heck was going on was revelatory and has helped me understand it finally after years of working hard to heal. Seriously, this is good stuff for anyone. The next commenter, Michael D.H. Lefkowitz's distaste for Peterson's ideas is understandable but misguided. His arguments have been buried beneath a sensationalized and politicized caricature created by those who are uncomfortable with his ideas and his would-be champions alike. Caricatures are only made if the one caricatured is, one, actually ridiculous, or two, presents propositions that demand dialogue in an open society but are easier to dismiss or champion with ad hominem and sweeping generalizations. What's wrong with Lefkowitz's argument? Peterson is not a men's rights activist. A look at his most popular lectures on YouTube shows him railing against rights when one should be focusing one's energy on personal responsibilities, men and women alike. It's hard to hear, but fair. Any parents out there? He does not claim women should be categorically or domestically submissive. Rather, he points out that despite the overwhelming similarities between the sexes, they nevertheless differ in priorities and interests, that women understandably struggle to balance family and career. He challenges young people's deep cynicism about the family. He claims our male-defined and exaggerated notion of material success only applies to the extremely small minority of men crazy enough to put in the work necessarily to actually achieve it, and at the greatest expense of everything else in their lives. 4, he doesn't champion patriarchy. He does, however, argue that it's not a cure-all to categorically blame it for every inequality or personal setback one experiences. 5, he explicitly critiques how movements such as MGTOW, men go their own way, as compensations for personal shortcomings, as cries for help. 6, lumping Peterson's comments on the quantifiable growth of alienated men with trolls and loners is a blatant gloss, at worst a mean-spirited smear. His controversial message for men: get yourselves together. And then someone comments, that didn't go well. Shame and decency, the next Jojo 20 Joe. Shame and decency are foreign concepts to the writer of this article, who clearly cut and pasted whole sections of her book or first-year women's studies textbook and slapped a giant photo of Jordan Peterson and a clickbaity title in a last-ditch effort to buttress their floundering book sales. I would ask her how long it took to get her to train both sides of her mouth to work separately like that, since on one end we hear the beat of the equality drum, and on the other end she so clearly feels comfortable shamelessly making money off of Jordan Peterson's name while simultaneously making cartoonish claims about him. I mean, wow. The real question is whether this is an actual woman or a low-level chatbot. Interesting thought. And then Richard has a different perspective. There is no such thing as a patriarchy. It is a myth invented by feminism. If it does exist, women fully consent to it every time they accept a date from a man, thus consenting to patriarchal structures such as coverture. The most public example being that feminist Meghan giving up all her feminist ideas to fulfill every sexist woman's fantasy, I guess Meghan Markle, fantasies of marrying a prince. So why does Lefkowitz maniacally or invidiously write patriarchy advocate? I'm a hominist and I do not believe patriarchy exists. I prefer the symbiotic term okay, so we're getting into words I can't even pronounce here. Widespread says fake stories like these are exactly why big media is failing. The truth will always prevail. Okay, commenter says anyone who has familiarity with Jordan Peterson's positions on the patriarchy and incels will quickly recognize the bogus representations advanced by Miss Lefkowitz. Does the WAPO have any serious editor who actually screens articles for hyperbole? So I think what some of them are saying is that that whole thing about incel is that Peterson he's saying it's a cry for help. These are people that are in trouble, and he's not endorsing incel or anything. Any only twisted jerk-offs would turn his words around, and someone complains that the posts are disappearing. So Carl G says, so where exactly are the quotes from Peterson that support Lefkowitz's claim that he's a patriarchy advocate who wants women to embrace lives as housewives? Without them supporting evidence, these are just hollow ad hominem, which is true. He's not quoting, didn't go through the effort to say, okay, he said this on this date, this means this buttresses my idea. I also notice how she takes specific ideas Peterson has, again, no quotes provided, broadens them, and then narrows in on a specific outcome that Peterson appears to have never intended. Consider this from the second paragraph. Jordan Peterson recently expressed his concern for men like Alec Manetta, a self-identified incel who, after blaming women for his inability to find a sexual partner, killed 10 people by driving his car through a crowd. Lefkowitz's intent here is to intimate that Peterson sympathizes with Manassian driving a car into a crowd of people. But is that what Peterson actually said? Not by a long shot. His argument was that he's concerned about people like Manassian because they pose a threat to society. Furthermore, he argues that there are things we can do as a society to reduce the potential for such kinds of violence. That's precisely where the discussion about enforced monogamy comes in. These are Peterson's own words. Simply put, monogamous pair bonding makes men less violent. In other words, he's making an argument in favor of the benefits of living in a society that values monogamous relationships without actually requiring them by law. The enforced part is an anthropological qualifier, not a legal one. So we're going to move on to this next. Is it a hit piece? Let's see. Yes. Jordan Peterson's intellectual hucksterism, and this is on the spec.com, written by Latham Hunter. The truth is that he's a gifted motivational speaker for racism and misogyny. Okay, well, he looks like a huckster right there in that picture with his hands up. He's selling you some snake oil, isn't he? Jordan Peterson's recent speaking engagement in Hamilton prompted counsel Matthew Green's observations that Peterson is inflammatory and popular with the alt-right, and yet Peterson is frequently lauded as today's most important public intellectual. In fact, Peterson is less an intellectual than a gifted motivation speaker for racists and misogynists. I take this writer for task because, number one, they claim he's popular with the alt-right. He may or may not be. I don't know that. I don't follow the alt-right. But he's also popular with a lot of people that have nothing to do with the alt-right. He's popular with people on the left. He's popular with people in the center. And he's popular with people that like to think for themselves. The part about racists and misogynists, I don't see any racism or misogyny. The racism is really, really way off. The misogyny, I can see where I don't agree with it, but I can see where because he's not towing the line that, for example, men and women are biologically not exactly the same. They're different. They're biologically different. So that's misogyny just by, as Steven Pinker said, that's, you're a Nazi just for saying what's reality about biology. But the racist part, I do not see that in anything. I've read a lot of articles. I've seen him live in person, seen tons of his video. I don't know where the racism comes in. Okay, so they're going to get a chance to explain. Take, for example, an argument from his YouTube video, the Marxist lie of white privilege. Okay, I guess that's where he's racist because he doesn't buy into this lie of white privilege. He criticizes the assertion that white people are more likely to be able to afford a place where they actually want to live than minorities. Peterson dismisses this as a wealth issue and not a race issue, because what about China? He moves on as if China were all the proof he needs. No, I don't think you got that. He's talking about it's a class or wealth issue. And I remember watching this. I don't remember the China part, okay? And that's a good point. But when you have people that are wealthy, that can afford things, it has nothing to do with their skin color, right? So if you're wealthy, wealthy. That doesn't say skin color. So we're going to move on from that. That was a lame thing. Here's another. Peterson's a great fan of hierarchies that preserve patriarchal power. He believes in the idea that women are linked to chaos while men are ascribed reason and logic. It's been represented like that forever, and there are reasons for it. You can't change. It's not possible. This is underneath everything. If you can change those basic categories, people wouldn't be human anymore. Yes, it's always been that way, so it must be right. If we treated women as logical, reasonable, we simply wouldn't be human anymore. It gets better, he says, that a world where white men are in charge is predicated on competence. He says, ahem, 2008 financial crisis, anyone? Brexit? Men have been at the helm of a vast number of incompetent decisions, never mind the wars. And I'll give you that, okay? So men, I think Jordan Peterson will probably say that men have been behind every success, okay? So, yes, people from all over the world of different skin colors can do well and do poorly. So, picking on one financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, does not say that men or white men have never done anything good. So I'm going to go on from this article because it just goes on to dribble. And let's get to something that's, well, hey, positive. What's the problem with men supporting Jordan Peterson? This is on Libertarian House, written by Mila Keller. And it was written earlier this month. Dr. Jordan Peterson, best-selling author of 12 Rules for Life, University of Toronto psychology professor and influential public speaker, has taken the media by storm, to the dismay of feminists and the radical left. The number of his supporters keeps skyrocketing. And note here, I'm going to interrupt for a second, the radical left, to the dismay of feminists and radical left. But there's people that are consider themselves liberals and left that are very supportive of Jordan Peterson. I'm one of them. Okay, so both men and women like Peterson, but you would never guess from reading most articles about him, whether it's the New York Times, the Chronicle, or the Guardian, they all make sure to highlight the maleness of Peterson's followers. Yes, the patriarchy, racist, misogynist followers of Jordan Peterson. It's not just that an objective observation about the genitalia of his supporters is being made. However, the media just can't stop rubbing, scratching, and clawing. It's as if the aforementioned genitalia are infested with crabs. In the now infamous Channel 4 News interview, journalist Kathy Newman asked Peterson, "Does it bother you that your audience is predominantly male?" While at first this question may not appear unusual or even critical, it certainly is. Has anyone ever asked Oprah, guess they mean Oprah Winfrey, a similar question about her female audience? Of course not. So what's wrong with men supporting Jordan Peterson? Well, I believe it's not just the male sex that bothers his opponents, but the message that men hear through Jordan Peterson. He appeals to their goodness, potential, and their manhood. He leaves his audience feeling empowered. Empowerment is good, right? Not really. Unless it focuses on women, empowerment is represented as oppressive, patriarchal, sexist, or simply a joke. Consider New York Times' description of Peterson's followers. Mr. Peterson is a celebrity in the men's right community, a loose collection of activists who feel men have been subjugated or betrayed by social progress. What if, instead of empowering his male supporters, he would shame them about their supposedly toxic masculinity and privilege? What if, instead of telling them to grow up, he would urge them to accept their fate? And what if, instead of pointing out the dangers of political correctness, he would argue against offensive speech? Well, then no one would have a problem with an auditorium filled with mostly men. But wait, there's more. Feminists don't really like female empowerment either. They like female victimhood. While they claim that they fight for women's empowerment, it is Jordan Peterson who actually empowers them. He doesn't accept that women are mere victims of oppression or innocent bystanders of their fate. He treats them as accountable individuals who possess agency, aka adult. This is also the reason why the women at Jordan Peterson's talks are presented as some kind of groupies with crushes on him. It's as if his female followers couldn't possibly be reasonable or intelligent. That would destroy the leftist and feminist narrative that Jordan Peterson's message is oppressing women. Well, I don't have a crush on Jordan Peterson. I am a supporter of him because of his positive influence on men and because of his influence on me, a reasonable and intelligent woman. Peterson has a far greater understanding of my struggles as a mother and wife that any feminist that marches against mansplaining or the cost of tampons. Yes, I understand that he doesn't support the women's movement, but neither do I. The women's movement is not representative of the average feminist. That's quite a difference. And here's what his opponents don't understand, or maybe just don't want to admit. I'm not the only one. I'm just one of many women who identifies herself with Peterson's message. We are women who are coming to understand our capacity for both good and evil, who are ready to take responsibility for our lives and don't feel threatened by empowered men. You may also like, and then here's a link to our other articles. Well, it's been another fun day talking with everyone out there about Jordan Peterson. I wasn't going to make another Jordan Peterson video, but there was such a plethora of articles out there, once again, they're actually not doing much trying. They're basically, it's like an echo chamber. They're repeating the misogynist, patriarchy, racist claims, M.R.A. claims about Jordan Peterson. And they're not, as the comments in the Washington Post article, they noticed, they're not very clever and not very well thought out. They're just copying each other. They're not interested, as this writer, Mila Davis, they're really not interested in finding out about. And you know what? Jordan Peterson is the evil enemy, so therefore we can't be bothered to find out what he thinks, what he says, and what he means. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Help us out by subscribing or clicking the like button or support us in any other way. Goodbye.